Hey guys, my Color Rare package came in. Color Rare is the website that I ordered my pigment powder from, and it's finally here. So I'm gonna make myself some legit watercolors, and I'm so excited. If you guys are new here, then I made watercolors, and sorry for the weird angles, I can't find my tripod. I made watercolors using a method called creating lake pigments, and it's a whole process. So there's a video on my channel about that, and the paints actually turned out pretty good, but they weren't incredible. So I decided to step it up and actually order some pigments to make some watercolors. So yeah, I'm really excited about this. This is hard to do with one hand. Okay. So I ordered a total of 10 pigments, ranging from 80 to 150 milliliters, depending on what was available. In a past video, I mentioned that I was considering ordering from Earth Pigments, where my inspiration for paint making, Arlene, got her first set of pigment powder. But shipping was so expensive, so while doing some digging, Color Rare was just a more affordable option. As a color theory noob, the pigments I chose aren't ideal. I bought 10 colors that I thought were nice, and I figured that once I had my paints made, I could mix them together in my palette, create a color chart, and then mull pigments together from there to create some interesting colors. I made these paints in 2 batches, one using my original binder that I used to turn my lake pigments into watercolors, as well as my soft pastels. And I have videos on both of those, so as usual, I'll link them down below. The first batch used 2 parts water, 1 part gum arabic, and half a part of honey and glycerin. It was a honey glycerin mixture. For the second batch, which turned out to be a lot better, and you'll see why, I used 2 parts water, 1 part gum arabic, and 1 tablespoon of glycerin. No honey. The reason paint makers and even some commercial watercolor manufacturers incorporate honey into their paints is because it makes them less prone to cracking while drying, and it also helps them re-wet a little bit more easily. I did find that paints with more honey and glycerin re-wet more quickly, but honestly, not by a ton. Also, after using paints with more honey and glycerin, they almost re-wet a little too well. The paint remained tacky, and when I wanted just a bit of paint on my brush, I would accidentally end up with heaps of it. And that wasn't the consistency I was going for. In terms of the paints themselves, I have no idea how to measure ratios of pigment to binder. I sort of just felt it out, and you could definitely tell. Some of my pigments were dull. The beautiful teal blue and the bright magenta were lackluster in terms of punchiness. Some of my paints had way too much pigment, on the other hand. The yellow ochre and burnt sienna almost resembled gouache. And generally speaking, these pigments tend to be more opaque because of their composition, but my version could have used a lot less pigment. Hello! Today, we're gonna top off some of our paints here. I'm gonna give you a quick tour. You can see some of them are super shiny. These ones here were made using my first binder, which I discovered has too much honey in it. Just because it's taking forever to dry, and even when it does dry completely, it's still super tacky. That's a problem. And I decided to solve it by drastically cutting down my glycerin and removing honey entirely. And that's partially because I ran out of honey, but you know, hopefully it works out. So you can see the difference here. Like, this was made without the honey and it's set super quickly. These ones here, I topped off before I actually filled up this one, and you can see this one's completely set. Whereas this one, like, I don't even want to touch it. It still looks super tacky, but you know what? We're gonna do it anyways. Oh yeah, look at that. Yep, that is very tacky. So, ugh. Okay, well, that's kind of gross. That one's gonna be mine. I won't give that one away because I got my gross little fingers in it. But anyways, today we're just gonna top these ones off. And the only difference is, I guess because I used less honey and glycerin, these ones shrunk down so much. Like, this is basically half, whereas the other ones didn't shrink down as much. So I kept them in these little jars here, and these are super convenient. I got, I think, 24 of these little containers on Amazon, and it was around like $13, so it was a really good deal. So I'll link them down below if anyone's interested, if you need little containers to store your paint. It looks like the binder and the pigment, there's a bit of separation. You could see that from here. There's some separation going on. So we're gonna have to mix this all up. And I'm not sure if I have enough paint to actually fill these up to the top, but hopefully we'll be able to fill them up at least a little bit. While mixing paints together, a lot of them would separate while drying on my palette, and they definitely felt a bit too chalky for my liking. I blame this on my lack of patience while mulling. I read that chalky paints are a side effect of half-assery, and I could very well contest to this. But I also read that if you over-mull your paints, they can become less transparent than you'd hope for, which I don't know if that's exactly true. The amount of information out there is quite scarce. I exclusively use my watercolors in pan form, so it's easy to say, well, you can test out your paints on a sheet of paper while you're mulling them, and I absolutely recommend this. But as someone who rarely uses watercolors out of a tube, it was difficult for me to tell whether or not my binder to pigment ratio was decent at that point in time. Another thing I'd recommend is to pick up some tiny little measuring spoons from Amazon or the dollar store. This is something I didn't do. I eyeballed everything, so even though I know that my magenta needs more pigment, I have no idea how much to add because I didn't record the measurements the first time around. So if this is something you really want to perfect, then definitely write your shit down. Finally, it was time to use my paints. I've been really into painting watercolor portraits. Every time I try to paint one from reference, I'd end up with someone who looks human, but they'd also look nothing like the photo I'm going off of. So I really want to build those observational skills and create portraits that resemble who I'm trying to paint. This is a full-on journey, and I've been building a collection of paintings, so I'll show you all of my progress in a different video way down the line, hopefully when I get a lot better. Anyways, skin tones have always been difficult for me to grasp, and unfortunately, my homemade paints didn't help this process. Quite the opposite, actually. I was hindered by them. The colors separated on my paper, the watercolors, even after completely drying, were so easy to lift. All of my watercolors dried really light, so the number of layers I had to put down was pretty surprising. The skin tone I attempted to paint looked nothing like my reference photo. I actually ditched it halfway because there was just no point. It was disastrous. But I didn't want to end on this note. Nuh-uh. So a couple of days later, I whipped out another reference photo, courtesy of Pinterest, and I gave it another go. This time with a better idea of what to expect. I still faced the same issues, but I worked around them a little bit better. Either way, it was good portrait practice. So despite my paints not working out very well, I learned a lot from this, and I'm going to really try and not perfect, because who has time for that, but get my paints to more of a tolerable level. And I know I'm bashing on my paints so much, but at the end of the day, I want to emphasize just how exciting it was to be painting with watercolors that I made myself. It was a joy, and I'll probably use them on their own. I'll try to avoid mixing them just because that didn't work out, but if I ever want to add a splash of color here and there, I could see myself picking up this palette again. Also, shout out to Yellow Ochre, which melted into my binder like butter. It was so pleasant to mull, and although it ended up being super opaque, there was just something so satisfying about working with this paint. Finally, because of the context of this video, you might believe that the finished painting doesn't look too bad. So at the end of this video, I attached a painting made with my Mei Liang Pretty Excellent watercolor set, aka the true MVP. All paintings shown in this video were created on Arteza Expert watercolor paper, not the 100% cotton one. So the paper I used didn't play a factor at all. you can really see the sheer difference in dimension between skin tones. It's honestly like night and day when compared to using a commercial set. Overall, this was a great experience, and it was nice to get my feet wet in the world of paint making via store-bought pigment powders. There's so much I don't know, but I'm actually looking forward to stumbling through the process until I figure it all out. Disclaimer, I was wearing a mask and glasses while mulling these paints, and I had a window slightly open for ventilation. Take care of yourself, guys. Finally, as per usual, products are linked in the description, along with a list of colors that I purchased from colorrare.com. I don't have a plan for next week's video. We're just flying by the seat of our pants on this channel. There's a lot on my mind right now, and as my beloved outlet, I really just want to talk about the whirlwind of thoughts circling through my head via a YouTube video. I touched on some of what's going on back in my painting on notebooks video, so I'll link that down below, almost as a preview to the crazy that is my mind. Anyways, let me know if you have any advice to share with a novice paint maker. Like this video if you enjoyed it, dislike it if you didn't, because you have every right to an opinion. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. If you liked watching this paint making process, I've somehow managed to build a roster of DIY art supply videos, so I'll link that playlist somewhere. Until next time, stay creative, stay adventurous, peace! Here, I'll show you this one. Oops. Uh-oh. Okay, so this was painted with my, whoa. Okay, this here was painted with my Mei Liang watercolors, and it was so much easier. The process was just, it was just a much better experience overall. I feel like the skin tone ended up a lot better here. She had freckles, and I had a lot of fun painting those, versus this one here, which you see I had a lot of trouble layering colors, and I think you could really tell. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Peace.